Guys, welcome back to Rookie Restorations and continuing on the series with our crash damaged, spectacularly failed MOT Classic Mini. Now, last week we did focus on some beginner metal fabrication to get ready for fitting the boot floor. This week we are finally going to be fitting that new heritage panel in the back of the Mini. As well as that, I'm going to be showing you some new toys, and I've got myself a little glass blasting cabinet. But a question for you. Imagine if there was a way to record every ignorant thing you'd ever said about classic cars. Now, you were right. I didn't give this car the full check it should have had, and I did find a little bit of rust. It's not crazy, it's not immediate, but in the rear of the car, under the horrendous subwoofer that was in there, and the carpet and the wood and everything else it was buried under, were a couple of small holes in the floor of the boot area. So that will need fixing at some point. I've looked at replacement panels, but it's not that bad. 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 There we go. Yes, today is the day that I am putting in the boot floor. Now, I have been sat here and there are other jobs that I could do before putting in the boot floor, like continuing to clean up the boot for painting and spraying because I've got the access, but I really feel like I need the visual stimulus of putting in new metal, getting some structure back into the car, and that's what the boot floor will do for me. Whilst I'm here, I think I can show you whilst I'm in this frame. Let me just move the camera. Hang on a second. Here we are. What I did with this lovely bit of metal that we got from P&L Minis was just grind off all the welding edges that I knew we were going to have to attack and put them back to bare metal. And after I've done that, I've then gone and got this stuff. So that is a weld through primer. Now, even though it says weld through, what it is actually for is like sandwich joints on metal. I've sprayed this where the metal's going to be touching. I'm also told if you do decide to get this stuff that is it the copper version? This is a zinc version, but I think you can get a copper version, which is the better stuff. All right, let me show you something else I need to do to get ready for the boot floor. Let's get in here. On this side, which is our little kind of pocket on the Mini, we've got these that were drilled out from the old boot floor. On the other side, I ground it off, so this is good. But what I think I'm going to do over here is just cut this out and put in a bit of plate so we can then put holes in our actual boot floor bit and weld through onto there. Whilst I'm in here, we've also got our heel board, which is still in. And what that will mean is when we get the boot floor in, it's going to be a lot easier to line up where the new heel board will go in. And I'll just mark that with a pen when we get this all lined up. So we can get this taken out and the new one put in. It's the patch in and it's looking good. Let me show you that very quickly. Fresh new material, all in there, but as always, need to be honest, put a bit too much heat through it and that has warped. That is the first time I've ever warped a panel. Although I've talked about metal warping in my last video, I thought I'd kind of explain why that happens. When we're welding a panel, we're putting an incredible amount of intense heat through that metal. And it's that change in temperatures from intense heat to rapid cooling that allows a panel to go from being completely straight to start expanding and contracting. And that's where you get your warp, which why it's super important to keep your hands on your metal when you're doing your welding and also apply that cold air to keep it as cool as possible. I have had the rear subframe glass blasted. It came out great. And whilst I was chatting to Ian about that, he was telling me about the hobby kits you can get. And I kind of asked around and I've managed to cobble together a little sand blasting kit that we are going to try out on the old battery box. and see how it goes. Right, if you want to save yourself 50 bucks on your battery box, all you need to do is invest in a £400 shot blasting cabinet and a £1,000 compressor. Oh, if you can afford to get yourself an extraction system, that's pretty good, so you're not coughing up glass dust for the next 5 days. And perhaps with a little bit of that 50 quid you got left over, you could invest in renting out your own workshop space. Money saved, right? I don't think it is the original battery box from the Mini. Let me get a bit closer. So this was cut out of the old boot floor. And the reason why I did that instead of ordering a new one is it's like 90% solid. And when I look on the top, the welding that is holding this in place are the tiniest little tacks. Here is the battery box. Absolutely amazing. Like, it did take a while. I reckon I spent about half an hour on this, getting it to this stage. But what I realized is it's very, very good at getting the rust off. It takes a little bit longer on the paint, but barely much more time. I think if I wasn't putting on a new heritage panel, I wouldn't have gone all the way to this level. I probably would have just done the corners, focused on a bit of rust, and then painted it up. But given what we've got over there, I'm really, really happy with the way this has come out. One thing that I forgot to do when I was dry fitting the boot floor and grinding off all these edges was I forgot about these brackets. So I just dry fitted it, marked them out with a felt tip, and you can see vaguely there. So we've got to take that down to bare metal, here down to bare metal. All along here is actually where the upright of the back of the seat will get welded in. So we need to clean all this up as well. And again, same here, rear panels and support struts will go here and here. I just went and borrowed this thing off a mate of mine, and I think it's called a Jodler. So it does two things. One, it puts in a little crease on your metal. I'll get a little bit closer. Will that focus for me? No, it's just focusing on my beautiful... Oh, there we go. And the other side, just here, that puts little holes through your metal. So for things like your plug welds, which is what we need to do on this, being able to cut these little holes without having to drill them will be amazing. So let's just have a look at how this works. So pop that in there. Bit of a leak. Right, so metal goes in this side. Pop that in there. There we go. And that is done. We've just put these holes in. That's all ready for getting our plug welds done, and I'm really, really happy with that. Tell me if you think I've gone a bit too close on the welds, but that's basically the side of our rear seats. So we'll carry on doing the rest of that, and then we'll get it dry fitted, and then we'll start welding. One of my biggest concerns with putting in the boot floor is it's such a massive part of the structure and the rigidity of the back of the vehicle. And when I was kind of playing around and dry fitting it, it really didn't feel like it was going to fit tightly. And I know it should do because it's a heritage panel, right? But kind of working from one section to the next and just focusing on one part of the job to the next really made a difference in fitting this correctly. Horizontally trying to get this to button in correctly, because you're trying to get it tight enough to the top of the rear of the rear seats to kind of catch there, but it also needs to go low enough to catch the rear, the heel boards that we're going to put in. So getting all that lined up took some real time. The bigger clamps were absolutely awesome for kind of holding things together nice and tight. I've also decided on a lot of the parts in the back of the car to just weld in like every third or fourth spot weld for the time being, whilst I make sure that everything else kind of goes into place. And if I have, please, I hope I haven't, but if I have made any mistakes, that way I'm not going to have to do quite as much work to undo those things. the boot's in. Things are kind of lining up, and yeah, it's crazy. Like when you start doing these restorations, I think for a lot of us, there is a small part of our brains that's going, you're never going to finish. You are absolutely never going to finish. And it's these sort of landmarks that really kind of push me to keep going. That is another week done on the Classic Mini, and we finally got that boot flooring, which has been such a massive mental hurdle for me. However, I'm super excited to see where we are. Next week, we're going to be tackling the driver's side rear arch and really pulling that back end together, and hopefully starting to look at painting the internal of that boot space. So if you've got any ideas on colour, drop me a comment. Moving forwards, there are definitely a few more surprises, a few more things I definitely didn't check out when I bought this car. So make sure you like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.